Hi, in the previous video I went over the underpainting stage for this painting. The scene is a small stream at the base of Mount Kurama in Japan. It is located next to Kyoto, and I'm painting this in the studio from a photo I took and prepared for painting. This time I will be showing you the second layer of painting and wanted to talk a little bit about the goals for this stage of the painting. Just as a recap, this painting is 50 by 40 centimeters and is painted on oil-primed linen, which is glued to an ACM panel, which is one of my favorite surfaces to paint on. For a little bit of background in my academic painting training, I am telling you this to give you an idea of how I distilled the process so far in my practice, and at least for the couple past paintings I've done, to make the process more natural and efficient for myself. So, I was taught to approach painting by dividing it into separate stages. This is vital for a student to help them focus on separate aspects of the painting process. So, the first was drawing, and this was usually done in paint by dry brushing. And there will actually be a video up on this soon. And the second stage would usually involve big color shapes, where each object or element of the picture would be divided into the shadow and light colors. Examples for this would be something like background in light, background in shadow, figure in light, figure in shadow, and so forth, giving consideration to all the objects in the image and establishing the value and color structure of the painting. After this, we would model the forms of the objects in the painting to enhance the three-dimensional impact of the painting in a stage of its own, basically on a dry surface. After this big form modeling stage, we would then start adding more information in the darks and finally some of the more nuanced, planar information in the lights. Following this stage would come the finishing stage, which has many names. Some call it rendering, some second painting, some refining, and so forth. This is the stage where one considers all the edges and transitions, the textures and the details. Usually this is done one small area at a time, since wet paint is required to blend into the adjacent colors for edge manipulation. So, for this stage of the landscape I'm working on currently, after essentially skipping the drawing stage and having combined a lot of the stages prior to the finishing stage into one, my goal here is to bring the whole image to a more refined state. In reality, the process is too fast to bring it to a real finish at this stage, but that mentality helps to not get lazy and leave things unrefined for yet another layer. The goal is to be able to leave at least some things untouched after this pass, and hopefully only touch up some things afterwards. As I said in the previous video, this process relies heavily on adding more information to the painting and refining things by comparing with the things I have placed down on the canvas. So essentially, if the underpainting is very loose and I haven't had a lot of work on it, I find it more difficult to do in just 2 passes. This of course depends on the areas of the painting, of course, some areas being more complex than others. Just to mention, in this pass I moved from larger bristle brushes towards smaller and softer brushes, as a technical note. So in this pass I started by layering some more colors for the water and working on more of the textures of the rocks in the foreground. I also found the forms of the rocks were not very convincing in the previous layer, so I paid more attention to those. Painting water like this is usually really fun, since you get play a lot with abstract, colorful stuff where you are looking to create the illusion of transparency of the water and the things on the riverbed showing up in some areas, while some areas get the cool reflections from the sky above. For the middle portion of the painting, I did the same things, but also started working on the foamy rapids of the water. There was a balance to be had between adding pure white for that oomph while retaining texture. In this stage, I also made sure to push the contrast and tried to find as much color as I could within the context of this being a fairly naturalistic painting, so I can't go crazy really, can I? Finally, I moved to the mossy rocks and the undergrowth in the background, trying to keep those soft and fairly low in detail, as well as the small waterfall in the middle, which I consider one of the 3 eye-catchers in this painting. Speaking of eye-catchers, composition is one of the most important aspects of landscape painting, if not the most important. When planning the painting, starting with the angle of the photo I took, I wanted to make a kind of zigzag with the light bits to lead the eye across the picture, so the picture I used for reference was planned from the start. After I came home from my travels, it was cropped and edited to accommodate for the most common problems with photographs before I accepted it as worthy to be painted. Maybe I can tackle the subject of reference photos in another video, so let me know if you would like for me to do that, leave a comment or something. This ended up not being the final layer of the painting, but I did put in a third pass of similar effort before I called this painting finished. This was, however, the final pass that I recorded. I feel the recording can get a bit bothersome at times, so at this point I was kind of annoyed that the feeling of having to record the painting was holding me back, so I considered the finishing the painting the most important thing, and I just went ahead and did it, and I'm happy I did. But before we wrap things up, I can go over the final refinements of the painting I did in the third pass. In the third pass, I was mostly focusing on the big picture. Working on this involved hopping around the painting to make sure things are working, adding and removing details as necessary. I also paid attention to softening sharp areas which were drawing unwanted attention and adding texture, details, and pushing the form and contrast in the places which I wanted to draw the attention. At the final stage, I also employed some glazes in places to push the contrast and color, so not all of it was painted directly. Sometimes glazes can be considered a crutch, but I feel they can sometimes make magic happen. So all these things mentioned are things where the artistry comes in, as it is simply looking at painting and making artistic decisions if you boil it down. Before this stage, the artistry came in at the composing part, and in between there was this sort of execution phase where you just lay things down and try to get things accurate before you get to this final refining stage, where you start to really guide the eye towards the points you would like the viewer to get a good look at. At this point, the reference has already become secondary, unless you find some mistakes to fix or feel you have overlooked some areas which should be pushed to keep up with the rest of the painting in terms of refinement. I really love the final stage of the process because it is really where you can start pushing yourself and painting further, and you start to get closer to that juicy finish which we all of course love. So here we have it. Thanks to anyone who got this far for watching. I hope this was interesting or helpful. As usual, if you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section or send me a message on Instagram. I will probably be updating my website soon and putting some old and new work for sale, so stay tuned for that. And as a final thing, I also wanted to remind that this painting will be a part of an exhibition featuring landscapes and still lifes in the city where I grew up, Tampere. The exhibition will be in Kehystarina and it will be on for the December of 2024. So, thanks for watching and see you again.